when you think about it, that you said, we actually study in school about the molten core, and it hasn't even been 100 years since the molten core has been quote unquote discovered. We're not sure if it exists. This is just a theory that occurred in 1936 to a woman that is studying seismology, and she at first wasn't really sure what is down there in the middle of the earth, and people just thought to themselves, it's something dense, and it's something dynamic in nature, and it's probably a molten iron core because we have a magnetic field, right? But stars also have magnetic fields, and differentiating between the two without actually doing any calculations is very hard, and nobody did these calculations. And if you download the actual file, the white paper they did, and read it, there aren't any calculations proving there's a molten core down there. So that got me thinking, can I calculate if a star could exist within our planet instead? Because there are many records of people thinking in this direction, that stars, miniature stars, could exist within planets. So I decided to do that. And I don't have an extensive physics background. I've studied physics in university for a couple of semesters, but I could easily obtain the formulas I needed, and I think my maths knowledge is somewhat accurate. So I decided to calculate if it is possible to have a star in our Earth. And there's actually someone else who had done that before, and it's, excuse my pronunciation, I'm not a native English speaker, but correct me if I'm wrong, it's Euler, because or Euler, how do you pronounce his name in English, I'm not sure.
I would say Euler, but Leonhard Euler.
Yeah.
But I might be wrong too, but yeah, this guy, brilliant mathematician, the guy who basically gave us the pi symbol and a few other mathematical staples that we all know.
Yeah, he was a close friend with Newton as well. And he often shared his research and studies with him. And the two of them would sit together and ponder on the mysteries of the universe. And both of them were also alchemists. Like you said, that your viewers and listeners are interested in alchemy as well. But yeah, so he thought that according to his calculations, there was a 600-mile diameter star, let's say, inside of Earth. And to many people, that would seem entirely crazy. But if you think about it, based on all the data we have, the molten core, the supposed molten core inside Earth, it has the exact same temperature of our sun, the temperature of the surface.
Mm-hmm.
So if these two are so identical in nature, why wouldn't there be a star there and a core instead? This was the first thought that came to my mind. And then I went searching for actual stories that would back this up, and to see roughly what the temperature there was based on eyewitnesses and accounts, as in books, because I can easily calculate the temperature that we would have inside the Earth if we have a 600-mile diameter star inside of Earth. That's not very hard to calculate. And what I found out is that in most books related to how Earth, the temperature there is 23.5 degrees Celsius. In Fahrenheit, I'm not sure how much that is. I can check and tell your listeners.
Well, your video, when you talked about temperatures, there's a core temperature, a surface temperature, the ambient temperature inside the Earth. And when it comes to the temperature inside the Earth that the inner sun would produce, you say it's about 75, which is, what I hear. Yeah, 75 degrees Fahrenheit. It's like San Diego all the time, my old stomping grounds. But there's no night, which is a weird thing for circadian rhythms and that sort of thing. But there are legends of a time where there was perpetual twilight. It's often described as something on the surface because of the whole electric universe model you might be familiar with, where some people think that Saturn was the original star and we were in a plasma envelope. It's quite weird. I'm sure given all the things you've looked at, I'm sure you're a little familiar with the electric universe, but these stories might actually be about cultures inside the Earth.
Yeah, actually. Well, the electric universe, I didn't go that deep into it because it seemed like a deeper rabbit hole, and I was focused on doing a simpler form of video that would be more focused, and going with the electric universe would have become a 2-hour video instead. I wanted to keep it
Yeah,
short.
that's a whole separate
Yeah.
thing for sure. But you do say with Euler's proposed inner star of 600 miles, well, let's work that out, because we know the circumference of the Earth is about 25,000 miles or 40,000 kilometers. It's about 4,000 miles or 6,400 kilometers to the center of the Earth. So when you do the math, it seems like there is enough room for an inner sun, and then for there to be an atmosphere, and then for there to be an inner surface. And another interesting detail is that the deepest earthquakes that we have happen at 450 miles down, which you say perfectly coincides with the distance that all the stories say is the path length from surface to inner cavity. So that's odd.
Absolutely.
We have these stories and legends, and we might write them off as myths, but when they contain details that actually jive with the real configuration here, then you have to scratch your head and give it a second thought.
Yeah, when you think about earthquakes, not only earthquakes, but also lava and magma, volcanoes, nothing of these occurrences and events and natural disasters, they don't happen deep into our Earth. They happen, like you said, 400 miles or a bit deeper, but nothing too extraordinary. So actually, if you think about it, if we have an inner core that is molten and it's that high in temperature, wouldn't and on Earth, there are just two elements that can actually withstand such a high temperature, and they're not abundant. You wouldn't find them almost anywhere. So we've studied how gravity works more or less. We have a vague understanding of it. And if Earth is one whole object, a piece of mass that's consistent, and there are no cavities in it at all, like large cavities, like in a whole Earth, then it would collapse on itself under the heat and gravity of this molten core, because at its most densest part, it would pull everything together inside it. And if it's that hot, everything would collapse and burn to the ground, absolutely become a molten lava ball that would float in outer space. And this is practically not very far. I mean, if someone has studied physics up to the 7th or 8th grade and they start thinking about this theory, pieces would come together. And what our governments did and put that into the school curriculum, I think is good. I would do the same, to be fair. Although I look into conspiracies, I think the general public we should minimize the amount of panic among the general public, because if they think there's something safe under our feet and they know for sure it's some iron ball or whatever, they just need to know, so they don't have any concern about their future or their past or whatever. But yeah, it could definitely, a star could definitely fit into Earth. And if you stand on that other side, inside Earth, then if you look at the star, it would be around the size of the moon or a bit bigger. Probably, if it's bigger, it would be twice as big, not something spectacular. And that's because you have a distance of around between, depending on how deep the Earth's crust is and mantle. We don't know. We actually don't know about this. And probably we will never know, because the deepest we've dug is around 20 kilometers, which is a bit more than 12 miles. And there is no way to dig that deep into Earth and to discover how deep our mantle is. The only thing we can do is to study seismic waves, and with the help of seismic waves, to discover when the mediums through which these waves travel change.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing else. We cannot guess what they are. We can only discover their approximate density in correlation with each other. But if you don't know what two things are, and both of them are mystery to you, and you know the correlation between their densities, you can never say what these two things are.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have too many questions to answer and not enough solid proof. Yeah. But talking about seismic waves, you have two types of waves that I mentioned in my video. I've actually studied geodesy and geology for 2 semesters, but I wouldn't have it as a strong point in my resume. It's not something I'm proud of. And when you think about it, then you would see this is very difficult to explain without images. So I would say that people listening now to check both seismic waves S and P type so they can have a better picture of how these work. But practically, both of these are observed during earthquakes, and P waves can travel through almost anything but change direction depending on the medium they travel through, while S waves cannot travel through atmosphere. They cannot travel through gases. So if you have an Earth that has a hollow pocket in the middle, S waves would not pass through this pocket. They would go around it and travel only through the solid ground that surrounds it. And this is exactly what happens.
Right.
If you check how S waves pass through our Earth, you will see this. And in the beginning, the woman that discovered this, she didn't know that S waves couldn't pass through atmosphere, and she thought they just don't pass through something very dense. But later on, they discovered P waves, and these waves, they actually seek the path of least resistance. And that's why they do not go through the core, because it's very dense. And the least resistance is through other mediums. And that's exactly how we know that there is something solid down there, but we don't know what it is, unless we actually go there.
Right. We have talked about the seismic data before, that when waves are tracked through the Earth, they do stop, or they have this gap, as you say, don't travel through atmosphere. And if we had an iron or molten core and everything was just solid, they would travel right on through. But if there's an empty space of air, then that explains why our ability to track these waves stops at a certain point, and then I guess continues on the other side, or there's just this gap where we don't get any readings. And you also mention wind patterns, and this is an interesting way to go about it, because I hadn't heard anyone break this down. But what do wind patterns show near the polar areas? Can you believe it, people? A video clip and a peek into how that sweet THC sausage is made. For some people, I'm sure it's nice to put a face to the name, so I started making clips that are a little more YouTube friendly than the full show tends to be. Get the full show on any podcasting platform. I prefer to keep it audio only, so we have a more decentralized distribution for a controversial show, and also so I can edit out the ums and ahs and barking dogs and all the things that happen when a person records in their home environment. And then if you really like the show, you can sign up for THC Plus, and instead of 1 hour interviews, you get the full 2-hour interview for just $8. I think that's a better deal, more of a win-win than asking you to support the show by booking a therapy session or buying generic Viagra. It's getting weird out there, folks. So just go to thehighersidechats.com or click the link at the top of any set of show notes, and all your wildest dreams will come true. All right? All right.
The Higher Side Chat Show. Quick call 1